Make in India. I don't see any politicians saying design in India.
Design.
We're talking about make in India, but we still want to design in America.
You've spent your initial years studying acoustics. Would you give us what kind of, did that follow through to your site and services model?
See, my father used to live part-time in South America. He started an Institute of Management Studies in Medellin. And I used to go there on Christmas vacations and walk around the city of about 1 million population at that time. Very similar to Ahmedabad. It was a mill town, big mill town in the Andes Mountains. And there were a lot of barrios on the hillside, people living in hutments. So I actually did my thesis at Harvard on a site and services scheme because I was influenced by that. And I was very fortunate. My guru is a Spanish architect, he passed away, Jose Luis Ser, who was very interested in urban planning and in issues of the poor, migrants to cities, etc. So I had also a person called John F.C. Turner, who had done studies of hutman dwellers in Latin America and how it's more effective when people build their own houses than when the government tries to provide ready-made houses, which become too expensive. So I had all of these impacts. Unfortunately, I had a close family friend, Barbara Ward. Barbara Ward is an economist. She wrote a book called India and the West, incidentally. She wrote a book called The Home of Man. Other books also, which influenced the way we think about society, not just building now. So I actually went with her to a Delos symposium. This was the founder of acoustics was a Greek called Konstantinos Doxiadis. And he had a center for acoustics in Athens. And every year he had a 10-day Delos symposium where he invited, maybe 10 to 15 very famous people, like Buckminster Fuller was there when I was there, Margaret Mead, who's a very famous anthropologist now. Arnold Toynbee in history was sort of the most famous present. And Barbara Ward was an extremely famous economist now. So I used to go to that, and I used to attend a seminar. There was a seminar every year leading up to the Delos Symposium, which was open to the public, and I used to go there also. So I got very involved with the acoustics movement, became a member, wrote articles for the magazine called Acoustics Now. So right from my visits to South America, when I was probably 20, 21, 22, that age, and then, don't ask me how, but I was surrounded by some very eminent statesmen. Okay. Adlai Stevenson, who was ambassador to the UN, who I knew personally, he was a very close family friend. So actually at his embassy in New York to the UN, I met Sir Robert Jackson, who gave me at, I think, age 20, lifetime subscription to the magazine Acoustics Now. So all of these influences were there. And when I went to Harvard, unlike the other students who did very stylistic, kind of cutting-edge designs of housing in different places, I did a site and services scheme. I could have failed probably for that because it was more systems and processes and studies of people's ability to pay and how they live that got me involved in that. Okay, so I came to India much later on a Fulbright fellowship and was in Ahmedabad and for a year with Balkrishna Doshi. And while I was there, I was doing a study of hutman dwellers and peri-urban villages and low-income settlements in Ahmedabad. And I did a workshop in the summertime also, measuring these groups and interviewing the people living there. So basically, I came up with the idea that the vast majority of urban citizens never would be able to afford the EMI, equated monthly installment, of a project built by a developer, designed by an architect, etc. In fact, if you look at Bombay, where you live, I think you live in Bombay.
Here, yes.
You see, if you take from the airport south to Gateway of India, only 3% of the people living in the metropolitan area can afford the EMIs of any scheme in that zone. And if you go from roughly the airport north, including Tana and maybe Vashi, a belt around there, another 6% can afford that. So now you've got 9% of the population can afford EMIs in that striking range from the city. And then if you go all the way out to Kalyan and all these places, probably up to the beginning of the Ghats, 17% more can come into Ulhasnagar, Kalyan, those areas now. So you're talking about 74% of the population cannot afford any form of housing. Now this, in my opinion, is a crisis because
absolutely,
if this huge population of partially educated, some of them actually educated, even with bachelor's degrees, can't afford to be part of the system. They'll never be citizens. They'll never pay tax. They'll vote, but with no stake. They're not stakeholders now. I think it's a crisis, and politically it will become a crisis. And I think for city planners and architects, it's also something that we actually can solve this crisis now if we push our case. And I think site and services, which I did as a student at Harvard, and then through again kind of a sequence of accidents, did a very large scheme in Chennai in the early 70s. He built, I think, 15,000 houses over time, and instantly the program has continued in Tamil Nadu very quietly through the government. But I think site and services is part of the answer. Everybody cites land as an issue, and we all believe that until the concept of special economic zones emerged. And suddenly you have large corporations taking hundreds and thousands of acres of land for industry, and you wonder, well, wait a minute, we were told there's no land, and now it seems there are thousands of acres of land if you have influence and money. So my question was, why don't we start special habitat zones along with parallel to special economic zones? Why don't we integrate into special economic zones areas for special habitat zones? And we have site and services schemes there with primary schools, health facilities, etc., skill training and whatnot, which actually is beneficial to the industries which are settling there. So my opinion is there's a broad policy package that knits together into a neat kind of new urban strategy.
Right.
So to me, this is what, if I were a young architect and wanted to be the Le Corbusier of this century, I think I would try to tackle the problem of India's, I'm not going to call them the poor, because 76 or 74% of the population, let's not call them poor. Let's call them the people who are outside the system. So how do we create a system that brings people in? Even developers may start thinking something, not site and services, but it could be modular houses, etc., because the high end is going to get full at some point.
But when you're talking about site and services, now we're also, is it interwoven into the system that people have some kind of an architectural language which is supposed to be followed when they're developing these properties, or will we have like the urban mishmash which we have?
Mishmash is lovely. What's nice about India is the mismatch. What's very boring about America and Europe is that the almost draconian order of everything. It's very nice when you go into the old medieval cities and tourist areas, but actually I find America extremely boring because America is supposed to be an example of free enterprise capitalism, but probably there are more rules and regulations in America, almost in any society, in terms of building construction, the kind of clearances you require, the kind of setbacks.
The freedom that you get as
no
a
freedom at all.
designer.
Even what they call affordable housing is very tight, knit, and we would call it upper middle class here, but they call affordable housing there. Simply because they subsidize people, they call it affordable. But if you see the standards of those housing units, they would be, better than average middle class 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom apartments in India. So I think let's not worry about mismatch and what it looks like. If you pardon me, it's a very middle class concern. It can be neater than a slum. It's not going to look like a Jopatpati. But Jopatpati is a huge laboratory to learn from. like we used to have these big seminars on technology and habitat. And I used to say, what are we're talking about? Why are we at an Institute of Technology? Why are we talking to structural design? Go into any slum and you can learn a lot. You can learn about recycling materials. You can learn about self-help, using people's spare time who don't have capital and don't have an education, but they have time and physical capability of doing things. So we should use slums, jhopatpadis and whatnot, as laboratories to learn how do people build with their own hands. Now, why they build relatively, I won't say they're bad, but they're not as good as they could be, because they don't have tenure. If you don't own the piece of land on which you're building a house, you're going to put
temporary.
Well, you're going to go up to a certain level. You might use recycled tin. You might use old bricks that you find in the roadside. It's going to be a mismatch, as you call
Right.
it. But if you own the property, and even if it's very small, you start having aspirations for something called status. No?
Right.
You want to marry your children, etc. So the house becomes a different commodity when they own the land. And there's several models for that. I mean, sited services on say 300 to 400 square foot plot is one approach. There are other things we've done in Hyderabad,
Right.
where we go into the bottom of the formal sector. I'm talking about class 4 workers in government. We built a very large scheme in use of Gallopper for class 4 workers, where they actually bought just one room and a wet core, an Indian WC and a nani for bathing, which was close to the road to cut down on the length of pipes. And they had deep plots. So what they would do is build more rooms behind their room. They would move in and either build a couple of rooms for themselves or build a room above their thing. But for their relatives and village mates, they would start building rooms and renting them out.
Okay.
Now the beauty of this is they become managers of habitat. They have to see that the nani and the WC and the tap are working. Otherwise their tenants start yelling at them. If the government starts doing this, the government doesn't care if people yell. Things become very complicated. So this was a system where you make sort of the bottom end of the formal sector become the land owners.
So it's like a self-sustainable model,
Yeah,
basically.
it's a different kind of model. But this mismatch you're worried about, I mean, I think we just can't. IAS officers are very worried about their colonial history, and the ICS officers before that, and they would like to live in a place like Chandigarh, which is anti-people. I would even say, well, I don't want to say that in the context of today when it's anti-India. But if you do a town plan which is too expensive, even for the middle class, Chandigarh is not a city where the middle class can enter. So everybody's at Maholi and the various surrounding areas, which are also expensive, incidentally. But Chandigarh is not a model. It's an anti-people model. Even to a great extent, Gandhinagar and all these new towns tried to emulate Western standards, Western models of plots and setbacks and minimum government areas, which made it more expensive to live in cities. Now, probably one of the biggest detriments to planning in India would have been even the Delhi Master Plan 1962.
Very more terrible.
Paid for it with good intentions now. But the point is that the Delhi Master Plan did not do planning for the villages in the Delhi region. Number one, then the DDA took all the land and created the land bank. So they had created an artificial shortage of land. And then you have building standards where you have minimum plot sizes, which are too big for most people to afford. And on those plots, you had setbacks and minimum coverage and FSI restricting densities. So Delhi suddenly had to spread out because it was a low density plan, automobile oriented. So again, how many people can afford automobiles? You're talking about 1 or 2% of the Indian population can afford an automobile. So you start planning cities for automobiles and you're creating chaos, virtually. So whatever chaos we see, whatever problems of access to housing are problems created by policy. They are not poor people accreting into the city and creating messes. They are policymakers and architects and planners creating messes. People are struggling to live in those messes. So we have to turn the whole vision of this upside down and say, actually, it's we tend to blame that umbrella. So you're living in a dirty place, it's chaos, etc. We've created that policy which makes them live there. We can change that policy. So that's the hopeful side of it, that these are all things we can manage and change.
So taking a few steps backward from here, you would believe that maybe one needs to be oriented towards this and not to say words like mishmash right at architecture school and college, right?
We need to teach more, and I don't mean economics the way they teach at Godrej Interio, big formulas, etc. We need to teach things perhaps through field-based case studies, where students go and do a case study of urban families who have migrated, say, in the last 2 generations into the city, and what were the procedures that they went through. See, people are looking for several things in a house. They're looking for access, that is location. They want opportunities for employment, for selling goods or whatnot. And they want status, for various reasons we know. And then they want tenure, that's security. Tenure gives you security, and everybody wants security in old age, middle age, when you're young. So that's why ownership of property is so important. Transportation systems can bring a lot of land into the loop. They can create accessibility if you have good mass transit. Right. Again, we've been very behind in mass transit. Pune is a city with virtually no mass transit, and that's a policy mistake. We don't have land for the poor, policy mistake. We have high standards of construction and development control rules, policy mistake. So you just go policy mistake, policy mistake, policy mistake, and you put people into a box and say, look at those dirty people. It's a mishmash, as you call it. And so, you know, you cut somebody down, and then when they're really down and out, you point at them and say, look at how horrible they are.
So how do we solve that? I mean, is there a possibility?
It's easy to change policy. See, we still live in a regulation rush, even today. I mean, Mr. Modi is trying to change things, but the point is that when you have secretaries who were educated and brought up where giving permissions is their strength, that's their power.
Okay. I'll just detour from what we were talking, and I think last week, around 10 days ago, I heard you speaking in the State of Architecture in Bombay.
Were you in the lobby or in the auditorium?
I was on the, you said you were feeling schizophrenic, and we were on the other side of that wing, right in front there. We actually got a few very brilliant photographs of yours, which I've sent around. But coming from there, you had mentioned that students should look at actually spending 50% of their time on site, understanding things. Yes, understanding construction and building systems. And do you really see that happening? And if yes, then how can we? I mean, we would love to facilitate that. We're trying to do some things in our own little way
let me
to bridge that.
See, if you look at, I designed the Maritime Institute between here and Lunala. Now, that's a very swanky looking institute. Right. But if you see the reality of that institute, it's hands-on. There's a big workshop where people learn how to actually fix things that get broken in ships now. And they learn the systems of how a ship is a small city. There's a sewage treatment plant, there's an electric generation plant, there's a water purification plant. The streets and the buildings have to be continually cleaned and repainted, etc. So it's interesting to see how they educate those people. They give them 6 months on campus, 6 months on a ship, 6 months on campus, 6 months on a ship. And on the ship, they start scraping paint along with the illiterate workers. The first job is right down at the bottom. And over their career, they work up and become a captain or a chief engineer or something like that. Now, the point is, in architecture, we graduate people after 5 years of highly theoretical, the blind leading the blind, teachers who have very little experience in building, teaching people who know nothing. And then they want to go out, and a lot of the students want to start their practice either immediately, some small interior thing, or they want to work for 2 or 3 years, and then they want to start a practice now. So you get a situation of people. We have 400 schools of architecture now. I would say we have 40 very good schools, right. And we have 360 pretty bad schools. Right. And I say bad schools, not that anybody intends to make them bad, but they simply don't have teachers with experience there. No, and those schools are all focused on building upper middle class, apartments, and then if you're lucky, you get into the State of Architecture with some gee whiz architecture now. But that's not India's problems. That's somebody else's problems. These are problems which we frame by looking at the West. actually the state of architecture was very good, because it showed that our architects are totally oblivious to the society they live in. And I think that when you look at that exhibition, it raises a lot of questions now. You know, it's like, what was her name? Marie Antoinette. And she was told people are rioting because they're hungry and there's no food. She said, let them have cake.
Yes.
So architects in India are saying, let them have cake. No?
Yeah.
And I think that's what the state of architecture showed us now. That we're telling them, let people have cake. And if they can't afford what we do, the hell with them. No?
Yeah.
So I liked it in that sense, but it was very revealing to me. So I really think, getting back to education, why can't we send kids to work, say they come in for 6 months, give them a good shot of what architecture is about and what the building industry is about, and then let them go on a construction site for 6 months.
Agree.
Let them come back for 6 months, let them go work for a structural designer, or let's say a project management company, come back for 6 months, and then let them go work. I would do on a site a structural designer's office in the school.
Services design.
So you could put them on, I would say 2 times they should work on construction sites before they graduate. 1 time in a structural designer's office, an MEP designer's office, a project manager's office, and then something they should be told, some other odd thing, not odd really, but say kitchen consulting, or a landscape designer, or an interior designer's office. And this doesn't see in 5 years, and with 10 experiences now, of which 5 are academic and 5 are hands-on. Then you're starting to create people who know something about the profession. Now see, one thing to do, I'm sorry to say that some of the great architects in this world never got a degree in architecture.
True.
Balkrishna Doshi did not get a degree in architecture.
He studied.
Taro Ando did not get a degree in architecture. Frank Lloyd Wright did not get a degree in architecture. Le Corbusier did not get a degree in architecture. It should strike people as strange that if you take the top 10 names in architecture in India and the world, that half of them never, completed
graduated
studying in an architectural school. It raises a lot of questions, no? So I feel that one could even say, well, we don't want the Council of Architecture to put their stamp of approval on this. Our kids anyway will hire somebody to do their municipal drawings. I don't do municipal drawings. I mean, I do the drawings, but I don't submit them because there's too much corruption involved. I hire a liaison architect to handle the municipal corporation. No architect of any repute goes to the municipal corporation and submits drawings. It's now totally outsourced to people who know how to work the system. Work the system. I'm going to leave it at that. We all know what that means, no? So, and you need to have a certificate to practice architecture so that you can go and legally sign in a municipal corporation, which nobody wants to do. So the whole system, I'm afraid, it can change and it will change. There will be a lot of young people who emerge maybe from the construction industry. But see, the trouble with those people will be is they won't have a socioeconomic understanding of this society. And this is a very big problem. So education has to teach the history of society, and therefore also the history of architecture as part of the history of society, not as a subject by itself. And it has to give hands-on experience in the field. I think it can easily, I think the council would support that. The council would love to even run a 4-year course. They've started having 1 year as professional practice, but the Act says it should be a 5-year course. That's why I think the council is stuck in that 5 years, but let it be 5 years. But let's have some new ideas about hands-on education. In fact, I think the council is very open to all these ideas now. I think it can easily be done.
Surely.
We don't have a situation where the council is antagonistic to new ideas. The council wants to do new ideas. I think we have to generate those ideas.
We're trying to do that in our little way. So let's hope we get somewhere. Meanwhile, I'd also like to ask you something related to smart cities. I think you have your 10 axioms and principles of urban design.
No, they're called the principles of intelligent urban design. Not design, not planning.
Okay.
They're just 10 aspects of what a good city should be.
Right.
And I won't say smart city because that's hype.
Right.
That word will go away after some time. It's a political media. People like you and politicians, they like words like smart cities because they can go on and on seminars and getting sponsors to pay for seminars because it's the smart thing. Green was the four-letter word 5 years ago, and the four-letter word of today is smart.
So there's a lot of focus on information technology, which was actually non-existent, let's say, even 15 years ago when we were younger. We just looked at a mobile phone. Now everything is designed around that. Do you think somewhere that human-centric design will human-centric design will actually diminish in architecture as well if we're talking only about smart cities? Because
media.
No. I don't call myself media for sure because of the policies and very, very strong focus on information technology, Internet of Things, and but.
Information, you can use the word technology, but education. If you look at my principles, there's something called opportunity systems. Now, if you look at the principles, each tend to have the same proportion, but if you look at the opportunity system, education is very important there. Smartphones are simply a way of bringing more potential information to people at their fingertips. All my houseboys have smartphones.
Right.
They all have internet.
All Indians do.
But see, the point is, students of architecture will not know who Palladio is unless they've been taught. You can't go on a smartphone and say, teach me who the great Renaissance architects are. You have to know the names of those people to go find them. Or at least you need to know the name Renaissance, and have some clue what is the Renaissance. Most, I'm sorry to say, Indian architects don't have a clue what is the Renaissance. They don't have a clue of the environment that Michelangelo worked in, or Leonardo da Vinci. So the smartphone it's like, unless you have a index in the back of a scientific book to look up things you want to know, you can't just start going through a 600 or 1,000 page book and find things. So the cell phone is like a 20,000 page book or a 1,000,000 page book that you don't even look at it, because you don't know where to open it. If I ask my students upstairs questions about even famous European architects, they won't know who they are. You would be surprised. Because they think everything is at their disposal, but they don't have an index in their mind. That's called education, which gives you that index to start knowing
where to look. Yeah.
And people are not that proactive as you may think. Of using their cell phones to learn. There are issues with cell phones. I mean, I do a lot of work on my iPhone, but the point is that it's very tiring to your eyes. It's not really that friendly. I read an article in the paper today about e-books on cell phones, smartphones. You can't read a book on smartphones. Your eyes will start bugging you.
Yes.
It's not that friendly. Okay, you may have an iPad and a laptop. Nothing like a real book to read. I just cleared plans across the street. Cleared plans. To get the final certificate of clearance, 22 lakhs had to be paid in development fees on a 5,000 square foot plot. 22 lakhs. Just development fees. Is there a road here? Is there a sewage system? Is there garbage collection? And in the open space next door, you have illegal shops. There's nothing smart about this upper middle class part of Pune with a high street. 5 minutes walk, you get to one of the fancy high streets in Pune. So where's the smartness? There are about 10 services, including sidewalks, garbage collection, sewage, street lights, roads, etc. We don't need a new movement to tell us all the gaps and lacunas in the cities. You just try to walk outside, you're likely to get killed walking down the street.
Sure.
So smart cities is kind of a dumb movement because it ignores all the obvious simple things that cities are supposed to do for people. And it allows city commissioners to go to conferences all over the world and talk absolute nonsense about things they know nothing about, and in the name of doing something important. So I've been invited to a number of smart cities conferences and I just don't go. If I go, I'll talk like this and they don't want to hear that. But the good part of smart cities is that for the first time we have a prime minister who's interested in cities.
Yes.
To me, that's the upside. Is that the prime minister is taking an interest in cities, and I think if we need a smart cities movement, to catch people's imagination, then so be it. I mean, I'll put up with that.
Right, that's true. At least some infrastructure development is happening with the...
That was happening. I mean,
it's being told a little more.
But infrastructure shouldn't mean more and more flyovers. No?
True.
See, the person who suggested we have 10 major flyover intersections in Pune, Wilbur Smith, is a consulting firm in America, who came here and said, put a flyovers here, here, here. They said, this will solve the transportation problem for some years, maybe 5 to 10 years. But when you build flyovers, people tend to change their driving routes and go to these flyovers. Right? So he said they are self-defeating kind of a medicine. No? It's a medicine that will eventually kill you. So best of luck on the flyovers. There's a lot of, I'm sorry to say, corruption in flyovers, which make it very popular.
I'm also a disciple of Mr. B.V. Doshi. Maybe if you can tell us a little about your experience of working with him and how it has kind of enriched you as a person.
What is important about Dr. Doshi is he is a great architect. He brought a lot of modern ideas into placemaking in India. But I think more if you, as a teacher, see why Doshi stands above people in his generation. There are 5 or 6 very important architects from his generation, is because of his impact on education. And let's start off with one of the reasons I think he had an impact is because he himself never finished his course at your JJ. And he learned through the studios and through construction sites about architecture. But Doshi is a person who always turns things upside down. I've seen him take a model in a jury of students and just literally turn it upside down and say, why not this? No? Because the student was trying to do something gee whiz and fantastic by doing something crazy, so then why not just turn it upside down? Which makes people think, well, why not? No? Or why do it at all? So I think Doshi is a person who could raise questions in the minds of other people. In other words, he's not a person who gave answers A, B, C, D, E. And I think Charles Benninger had a lot of answers and a lot of beautiful building. But Doshi made people think themselves, what are the answers, what are the problems then? And Doshi has a very huge amount of patience. I don't have that much patience. Huh? And, somebody will walk into his studio, he may be in the middle of some crisis management, but he'll just stop everything and welcome those people into the studio, give them 10, 15 minutes, and have an impact on them. It's very difficult, you see, to have an impact on people just in a few minutes.
Right.
And so he's a charismatic visionary, and more than that, inspirational. Now, what does it mean to be inspirational? See, somebody inspires you if they tell you something about yourself you did not know.
Right.
And that inspires you to be what you want to be and who you are. So in that way, Doshi's inspirational. He inspires people to know about themselves, and they might realize, hey, I never wanted to be an architect. I wanted to work in gardens, so maybe be a landscape architect, or maybe I wanted to be a real estate developer. And and Doshi's always been open to that. If people say, sir, I don't want to really be an architect, he can say, great, what do you want to be? Let's talk about it now. So I think he's not a one-track person, and he's not really critical of in a very cynical way. We're all very critical. We have something. We find something wrong with each person. Right? Doshi finds something right with each person, and I think that's something that made him a great teacher. Why not? It is a design hub.
It is,
of course, but it's see, the trouble is, we all think of the Bombay advertising world, and we think of clips in TV, etc. Indians are making pots, man. They're making designs on their mud walls in Kutch, and Americans can't make anything. See, I'll give an example. Now, I've spent a lot of time in Bhutan, where I've done the capital design. Bhutan, with a population of not even 1 million people, has an annual film festival of Bhutanese films. They're made with, what are they called, handy cams, videos. But they have 18 entries every year, 15 entries, 20 entries. Huh? Do you think Alabama in America has a film festival? Do you think they have a community of people who make films about life in the South in America? Or do you think people in Worcester, Massachusetts, which means we'll have more than 500,000 people, will be larger than Bhutan, will have a film festival of their own films? They'll have British films and French films and the Hollywood film.
Right.
See, America, everything is sort of contained, specialized, and people stop being creative. No? Probably the most creative thing they do is cook an omelet in the morning. Choose which kind of cheese to put in. So the point is, Indians are extremely creative. I mean, they're making design decisions all the time. I'm very sorry to say that make in India does not mean design in India. Okay, I'm going to speak in 361. Who's the main speaker? A foreigner. Who's the second main speaker? A foreigner. Even I'm kind of, see, I think some people are not sure whether I'm an Indian or Farangi now because of a racial thing. So I think every place, if you go to the Indian Institute of Architects, they all clap their hands and call as many foreigners as possible. NASA, call as many foreigners as possible.
True.
And that's a weakness of our society. You know, we criticize the British and the Mughals, but we would have been clapping our hands at that time in history and inviting them to come and eat with us. And so the point is that make in India, I don't see any politicians saying design in India.
Design.
If you look at the smart cities corridors now, they've hired all these not even planning firms, but management firms now, even IT firms that have consulting wings now. And these people don't know anything about urban design, urban planning. Except they know the big lingo of get a lot of data, talk about how much time it takes to drive a car from A to B, congestion rates, some new jargon they'll come up with about how to measure cities. It's nice, but it's not really where things are at. Yeah? So we're talking about Make in India, but we still want to design in America.